So this is Miss Abby Willis
Yes.
from Aspen Radon, who's coming to join us today. And I just wanted to have you here. I know that as real estate agents, the law has changed a lot in the last year. Which requires changes on our part and sellers, and it feels like radon is just a subject that it seems like most people don't know much about it. So
I would agree with that.
Yeah, I wanted to have you here. Abby is, her company, Aspen Radon, is one of them that I typically refer people to whenever they run into any radon issues. So I guess let's just start by telling people what radon is, why they should be concerned.
All right. Well, thank you for having me, Heather. This will be a good opportunity to inform people and let them know about radon a little more. So radon is a naturally occurring radioactive gas. It comes from our soil, and a lot of people aren't aware that, especially mountainous states have particularly a lot of it, but it comes basically from the uranium that breaks down, and then it becomes radium, and then it starts to become the radon gas. So it's found all over. It's particularly high in, like I said, mountainous states and that sort of thing. And then once it becomes the gas, it starts to come up through the natural cracks and crevices that all homes have. And so the gas is heavier than air, and it does sit low, but so people often say to me, well, we never go downstairs anyways. It doesn't really just stay downstairs. What happens as it decays, it starts to create microscopic products that float through the air by our HVAC systems and fans and things like that. So it starts to draw it up to all parts of the home. And that's the product that can get into your lungs and cause lung cancer. Yeah.
Right. I think I was reading some cases. It's actually the number one cause of lung cancer in non-smokers. Obviously, smoking's number one, but
yeah,
people that don't smoke, radon is the number one cause of lung cancer.
It is, and it's non-detectable. You can't see it, you can't smell it. It just is like specks of dust.
Yeah. Tasteless, odorless.
Yes, exactly.
You name it.
Exactly.
So unless you test for it, you are not going to know that it's there.
That's a very good point. That's exactly what I tell people all the time. It's like I'll get calls on occasion where they're like, my neighbors have a radon system, I need one. And I'm like, well, have you tested? And they're like, no, but everyone else has one. And I said, well, when you start to see them in your neighborhood, the odds are you probably do, but not for sure. You should test, because it literally comes down to the soil you are built on.
Yeah, certainly. I think I was reading too, it's as high as 48% of all houses here in Colorado, if they don't have a mitigation system, I think, right, that will come back with levels above the safe EPA limit, right?
Yeah, it's nationally 1 in 15 homes test high for radon, and there's no immediate health effects, but yeah, radon is a Class A carcinogen, and in Colorado, we're the 9th highest in the nation. So, and the way the EPA rates states by how high their radon is county, and they go red, yellow, green. And so Colorado has no green. We have a little teeny bit of yellow, and everything else is red. El Paso County is a red county. But again, it's not every home, but it's 1 in 5 homes that in Colorado that probably has radon.
Yeah, that's pretty high.
Yes, it is. So, yeah.
And one of my other questions for you is, because like you said, it's pretty hit and miss. I mean, maybe there's a higher prevalence if you see that a lot of your neighbors have a system, but at least I was told by somebody a long time ago that you could have a house here, tests way high, the house next door, the limits are fine. So
that's why you test.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's no rhyme nor reason to it. One of my other questions I had for you was, do the levels fluctuate, like in a particular home?
Oh, yes. So that is the other thing. Some people, they'll say, well, my radon came in at a 9, and then they'll get a digital, and then they'll see it moving. Radon is always moving. So when you get a test result back, unless you did a continuous monitor test, which is a device they bring into the home, and they sit it out for 48 hours, and then they can track the rise and fall of radon through that 48-hour period. If you do a short-term test, which is like a charcoal-based test, You can run that. You should run that minimally 48 hours as well, but you'll only get an average. So you'll get maybe a 9 or a 7 or whatever your average is, and that's the lab is already determining what that average is over that period of time. So yeah, it is always moving, and when it's windy, it could funny enough, depending on the direction of the wind and how your house is built, it could help reduce the radon. It can increase it dramatically as well. So in cold weather, typically our homes are higher in radon during fall and winter and a little bit less in spring and summer. And that's because of the way we naturally live. We have windows and doors open more often in the spring and summer. The cold weather impacts the levels of radon. It can impact it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it's all sorts of things like that.
Yeah, so when your house is locked up tight, it's just going to build up, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And then when you open windows and doors, of course, that starts to air it out. I've literally had realtors, unfortunately, say, "Oh, just open a window." Well, that statement is correct, but as soon as you close that window, it's going to start to rise again within a few hours.
Right.
So.
Have you seen, like, say, a particular house, somebody had it tested, it was within the safe limits, and then 5 years down the road it tests, and all of a sudden it's not?
Yes, that happens all the time.
Okay.
And let's talk about what is the safe limit. So just to clarify, the EPA has picked a number of 4 picocuries per liter of air as the take action point. So if it's 4 or higher, you should take action. They recommend that if it is between 2 and 3.9, that you consider taking action. But there is no safe level of radon, just to be clear. It is a radioactive gas. And so the average home in Colorado is 6.4. Yeah.
Yeah, so
And,
definitely above the 4. Let me ask you, when you guys put in a radon mitigation, what levels do you typically see after the mitigation system is installed?
That typically the goal, of course, is always to get below 4.
Right.
So that it varies from home to home and which mitigation approach you use. Some people only, when they Google radon mitigation, typically what will come up for them is what's called a subslab depressurization. That's one of the more common, and it was one of the only ways, besides crawl space mitigations, that mitigators mitigated homes with. Now and today, especially El Paso County, a lot of counties actually, but in El Paso County, since 1984, our building code requires that homes have perimeter drains. Some people recognize them if you call them French drains. Mm-hmm. So here in El Paso County, we know if it's built after 1984, it should have a drain unless it got a pass by the soil engineer, which is uncommon. So the way to mitigate is to use the drain if that's a potential. And so when you said about it was this at one point and it was that at another, and how well do we get it down? In subslabs, it's a little more challenging depending on the footprint of that home to get the radon down, because a subslab is where you're coring a 4-inch hole inside the house, and there's criteria about how much of a cavity you dig and all that kind of stuff, but you're trying to pull a vacuum from a 4-inch hole across the footprint of a home, and obviously homes come in all sizes.
Right.
So it's a little more unknown how well you'll get the radon down.
Okay.
Versus if we're doing that foundation drain or the French drain, if it's installed in a typical manner, it will be going around 3 full sides of that house, possibly even all 4 sides. And when I put a vacuum on that with our radon fan, we're going to be pulling from all 3 sides or possibly 4. So I almost always guarantee those jobs, unless a homeowner tells me, well, I know that my foundation drain has been crushed over here in this corner. Then I might not guarantee it. But with subslabs, the 4-inch hole inside the house, I don't always guarantee those, depending on where their radon starts and how big that footprint is. Might need a second system. Uncommon, but
yeah,
definitely happens.
But that could be a possibility.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk a little bit. It's not, well, it's surprising to me, I guess, that more wasn't already known about radon, and just because I've been doing this for 20 years, how things have changed through the course of time. I mean, more information is disseminated all the time. We learn things all the time, but it was so rare 20 years ago for anyone to test. And now everyone tests, almost always, on a purchase.
Well, that's more because of the way the laws have recently changed as far as testing on a purchase and how their realtor guided them at the point of the sell and the buy, the transaction. But what was your question again? That's funny.
Well, I don't even know if I had posed
you were
one
making
at
a
this
statement
point.
of that.
Yeah.
The knowledge of radon. Sorry.
Yeah.
So definitely, it's been around for a long time. Dennis, the person that owned Aspen Radon before me, he's been doing it since the 1990s, and so it was known and it was aware. But as far as really the general population, no, it's just become an increasingly because of public health and the EPA. They're raising the awareness. January is actually Radon Awareness Month. So they sometimes will put out commercials or radio pieces that talk about radon. Hey, you should test, be aware, that kind of thing. But yeah, a lot of people aren't aware of it. I talk to people who've lived in Colorado their whole lives, and now they're testing, and they're like, we didn't know. We just didn't know.
And that's kind of scary, because I meet people all the time that have been in their house for 30 years. And like you said, they purchased it. They're not talking to people. They're not getting new information. And they've just lived there that long, having no clue that radon is even a thing or something to be super aware of and test for and mitigate for. Because, I was looking, I think it said 21,000 lives across the whole U.S. are lost, they think, due to radon.
Yep,
and
approximately 20,000 people.
Like 500 here in Colorado. And I think they were quoting some cases of like lung cancer. We have about 2,400 in Colorado. And I want to say that they said as high as like 22% of all the lung cancer cases they could link back to radon.
Yep.
Here in our state.
It's a problem, especially when people don't know. It's more insidious because you don't know, and it's in your home versus cigarettes cause it, and if you choose to smoke, that's your choice. But you're just living in your home and not knowing that you could be negatively impacted.
If you do smoke, then radon's like a double whammy for you.
Yes,
because I think I was reading like out of 1,000 people or something, if you're a non-smoker, even radon levels as high as like 10 picocuries per liter. Maybe 18 people out of that 1,000 could come down with lung cancer. But if out of all the non-smokers, but then if you add smoking to that mix, then you're upping that from like 18 people out of 1,000 up to 150 people out of 1,000. So
as a smoker, it's
as a smoker,
risk.
You definitely want to test and make sure that you're got your levels down as low as possible. So tell everybody just what a radon mitigation system is.
So there's different ways to mitigate a home, and the home is not based on the size, and the mitigation approach isn't based on the size. It's based on the structure and the year the home was built, if a mitigation company is doing the right thing for the homeowner. So there's the subslab. Basically, in the end, there's different ways you do it, but you always will have a fan. You will always have a discharge that should go up. There's specific criteria about what a safe discharge is. A lot of people just land over roof line, which isn't necessarily always the only safe discharge, but that'll be something that I have that conversation with every homeowner. But that's where they all are common. They have the fan, they have the discharge. Depending on the home, whether they're built before 1984, which would be a sub-slab depressurization. I spoke about that earlier, the 4-inch hole inside, trying to draw a vacuum under the slab. There is the French drain or foundation drain approach, which is that perforated pipe that goes around it's underground, because I'll get people who go, I don't see that. I've never seen one of those. You're not going to see it. It is below ground, a couple feet below the footers of your home, so you won't see it. And then finally, a crawl space. If a home has a crawl space, you're going to mitigate the crawl space because that's a straight up dirt floor. And then everyone, if this is a aftermarket house, meaning it's already been built, then the fan is going to be on the outside. A radon fan is always on the outside, or in a non-livable space, meaning it could be in an attic because no one's living above that. That kind of thing. So that's a potential. But that's harder to do when the home is already built.
So does that, if you're tying into that drain, does that require excavating?
Yeah, we hand dig.
Okay.
So because you just don't know, there could be lawn, sprinkler lines down there and that sort of thing. And the way we do the foundation drain, the perimeter drain, is we're either going to go through a window well, if the home has window wells, so that before we rise vertically with the fan, so that it's partially hidden, and then it starts to go up and over for the discharge. Or if they do not have window wells, like in the country more often, they might be, or they might be just a walkout basement. We're going to go for the low side of the house, because I don't want my guys to dig in an unsafe, dig ridiculously deep.
Sure.
The average is probably 3-4 feet, sometimes 5, and they're hand digging. So yeah, it gets a little.
Yeah.
And it's hard, it's hard. It's physically hard work.
I don't like digging holes.
Right. And so, yeah, we dig. And then the thing I really want people to be aware of, and it's something that a lot of people, homeowners don't know, right? They're like, if they call a mitigation company and they go, yeah, we can mitigate, here's what we're going to do. They don't really know the difference between the mitigation approaches. So if they tell, and I see this all the time, especially companies coming out of Denver, or companies who are, they're based out of Denver, but they have an office here, they'll just quote a subslab depressurization, no matter what the year of the home is. And the reason they do that is because they don't have to come and look at the house, and they know that they can get in and get out in a certain amount of time, and then they will be able to do 2 jobs or more in a single day. Whereas when you dig, it's a little bit of an unknown. We know typically it should only, that drain should be 2 or 3 feet below the footers max, but you don't always know, because it's kind of a crapshoot on what did the builder do when he trenched it and backfilled it. You just don't know. So it's a little risky. So a lot of them won't quote that.
Well, and that's the other thing too. That's why I like you guys. I trust you guys and refer people to you. I've had other people just in an effort to save money. And the crazy thing is, for all of the health benefits that come from radon mitigation, it's really not an overly ridiculously expensive fix either.
That's a really good point. It's not in the grand scheme of doing something to your home that will save your life,
right?
Or like, well, a heater will bring you comfort, but the average, the price varies. Companies out of Denver can usually charge a little less because they're only going to do that sub slab, and they're doing its scale of economy, right? If they do 3, they can afford to charge less because they're already going to be in and out of your house in a couple hours and moving on. But yeah, it's average, and this is an average. Not crawl spaces are always more expensive, and I can explain why. But the average is probably around that $1,400 mark.
Okay.
Sometimes out of Denver, you might get it for $12. It just depends on the company.
I was going to say, most of the time what I see is like between $1,000 and $1,500 for radon mitigation. Yeah. Except, like you said, I've seen some companies that guarantee not over $1,000, but I think they're coming in, they're doing that quick job, and then you said they're out the door, and that's one of the least reliable ways to mitigate, or, like you said, to pull all of that through a 4-inch hole. You may not be getting enough of it to get down as low as you would really want to get down to. So that's another thing to kind of be aware of, is just because a house has a radon mitigation system doesn't mean that you shouldn't still test it and make sure that it's working properly. Make sure that whoever did it did a good job and that the levels are down where they need to be.
Yeah, let's speak to that, though. With the sub slabs, the 4-inch hole approach, we have very good results with them, but they're less a less sure deal, right?
Mhm.
Because you don't know how the soil is settled over the years. You don't know how the house was built. Like, does it have a knee wall down the middle? Does it have a concrete wall down the middle if it's a big, big house? You just don't know. And plus, you're just trying to pull a vacuum across maybe 2,000 square feet. That's a challenge. So there's that. We do have good results, but they are less likely to be assured at below 4.
Yeah.
But you'll still get a lot of companies that will guarantee that, but they don't always really return to fix the situation if it didn't get below 4. I know with Aspen Radon, and I lose some jobs because of this, I'll say up front, once a home, especially if it has a fairly large footprint and it gets into the double digits for radon, I won't guarantee the job. I will tell them the odds are in their favor, we have good results, but I'm not going to guarantee this job. Now, doesn't mean I'm going to abandon you if it started at a 18 and we got it to a 7. We can work together to try to lower that, and the natural next step is going to typically try a bigger fan. If you see a reduction, you know you have a good hole. But you don't always, so trying a larger fan might just kick it over that low to lower it to 4. Yeah.
That's good.
So,
and like you said, it does depend on the house, right? So, and I know that was a misconception for us that we'd kind of heard over the years. So I'll clear that up, that like you think, okay, this is decaying in our ground. So you typically find those high levels in basements where, like you said, if it's a lower level that has an opening to a crawl space where all of that gas is building up in the crawl space and then coming inside. But there's no guarantee. I've seen it in 100% above level townhomes. I've seen it
as far
in,
as where it'll be or won't be.
Yeah, ranch houses without a basement. So
that's very true.
it doesn't, just because you don't have a basement does not mean that you don't need to test and see what radon is, because it could be above the ground too.
I get that a lot. People go, I'm on a slab. Well, that doesn't matter. Your slab is sitting on soil. Not literally, but they've got frame, but it's basically a slab on ground. So yeah, it can be, like you said, it doesn't matter about the home. It comes down to what you're built on.
Yeah. And I think correct me if I'm wrong, but is one of the more expensive mitigation jobs when you have a very large crawl space.
Yes.
And that is, I'll let you go into detail, but that is because you have to do what? To mitigate
good question.
It if there's a huge crawl space.
Yeah, well, whether it's small, meaning under whole house, maybe it's only 1,000 square foot. For us, that's not really a large one, or 2,000 or 3,000 square feet. The approach should be the same, but the cost is going to be more. And the reason for that is a crawl space takes a lot more materials and manpower to do the work. In a crawl space, if it's done right, you're going to put a perforated pipe around the perimeter of that foundation, and how much you need of that is going to be dependent on what's the shape of that house. Not everyone's a square and not everyone's a rectangle, which is pretty straightforward. And then you're going to come in and you're going to bring your radon barrier over that, and then you have to seal all around the foundation, and if the furnace is down there, if there are floor supports, 4x4 floor supports, all different sizes actually, but you're going to have to seal everything. You seal it all, and then you finally go out to the exterior, mount the fan and the discharge, which is, again, like I said earlier, is similar to all systems. But a crawl space, and it's really hard on guys' bodies. I mean, it's you're down there for the whole day or maybe 2 days, and you're crawling around. So it just is that is hard. It's a more complex job. But the upside to crawl spaces is that if it's a whole house crawl, especially, I guarantee them anyways, but you get a really low result because you're kind of covering every corner of the house by doing that crawl right.
Yeah. How do you guys seal it?
We use a commercial grade polyurethane.
Okay.
So there's very specific criteria. Interesting enough, I was just in a house yesterday that we were fixing their crawl. Whoever had done it before many years ago just used the vapor barrier that most builders lay down. They just left that, put a pipe on the ground, and put the fan inside the crawl. I mean, it was wrong in so many different ways. But
Oh, no.
yeah, so we just fixed that. But what was the worst? What was your original part?
Just, how it's done. And then we were talking about the sealing and
Oh, yeah.
stuff.
Sorry.
Because you've got potentially all of that dirt prior, if it was old enough that the builder didn't lay anything down, a vapor barrier. If it's new, they have a vapor barrier, but
Yeah. So
so you put in your drains, your
you
perforated
put the perforated pipe on the soil. Because I'll even get people who go, well, we have a vapor barrier. That is not enough. That vapor barrier is just like it said, is for vapor. They lay it from basically wall to wall. But when you mitigate a crawl space, you're required to bring it up at least 12 inches on the sides, on all sides, if you can. So that isn't going to work. And the key to a good crawl mitigation is that you get a good seal. Because you're trying to trap the radon below and then suck it out through that perforated pipe out to the exterior.
Yeah, and then the fan blows it on away.
Yeah.
Wherever it's vented to, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what I was always curious about. So I know that they put in the pipe, lay plastic over it, but then how do you make sure it's really sealed? So you actually use that.
Yeah, polyurethane. It's a commercial grade. So and then of course this is a question I get, which is a good question. We duct tape seams and we duct tape wherever we do our pipe for exit point. And people are like, you duct tape it? And we're like, no. We polyurethane it below. Like if there's a seam, because it's a big enough crawl, you have seams, you got to go 12 inches over each piece of plastic. But we'll duct tape that because the polyurethane takes about 12, 15 hours to cure. And we don't want someone to go down there, because some people store things in their crawl space.
Yeah.
We don't want someone to go down there and drag something across and pull it apart. So we'll duct tape it to give the polyurethane time to cure.
Yeah.
And that's why people will see duct tape in a crawl space.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's just that extra step to make sure it has time to cure.
And so for, like I said, we gave people an average cost of between $1,000 to $1,500 for the
Other
what
mitigation
did you call that?
approaches.
Other mitigation approaches,
Yeah,
but
the
like a
slab
crawl
or-
space approach, like what you're talking about. What's a more typical value on something like that you would see?
So with crawl spaces, I literally have a spreadsheet that I'll put all the materials in so I can figure out the numbers, because they're all different. And but a rule, if someone's just calling me just for phone quotes, which I don't encourage you to do phone quotes, but some people do, and some mitigators, that's all they'll do. At any rate, I will tell them whatever the square footage is of your crawl space. So just for easy math, we'll say it's 1,000 square or 2,000 square feet. You should add $1,200 to $1,300 to that. So what I'm saying is, if it's a 2,000 square foot crawl, plan on spending about $3,200 to $3,300.
Okay.
And or more. It'll be in that range. You're getting closer.
Yeah, that general range.
Yeah. And it kind of depends on what's going on for the crawl space, because there are all kinds of crawls. And some are, if it's really a nasty crawl, meaning low clearance, hard, they're going to charge more labor because, it's tough.
Yeah, I would imagine it would be really tough to get in there and do what you have to do if you don't have enough clearance.
Well, if you don't have enough clearance, there's a whole nother type of, you write your contract in a different way, and you obviously walk the customer through what the options are and what the outcome of that might be. Because some homes here, and really anywhere I'm sure, but here are really old, and that's the other thing. Manitou Springs is a good example. A lot of add-ons to these houses. And so they're going, well, we have 3 crawls. Okay, then. That's going to be a whole nother animal. Unless whoever added on was thinking through this, which isn't common. Hey, let's make sure we can reach all 3 crawls in some fashion, because there's no way to attach those crawls. And so now you might treat the largest crawl and see how it does. You might need another system because you have another whole different crawl over
so
here.
you might be putting in numerous systems, huh? And that's
Rare.
another thing too. Anybody that isn't buying an existing home, but they're purchasing from a builder, I know typically builders do not test for radon, and at least it's been from my experience, even though I always mention it to people. I know you're buying new construction. I know they give you a 1-year warranty. They're going to come back out. They're going to fix any cosmetic issues that you're unhappy with on your 1-year anniversary. But I always recommend test for radon and do a sewer scope, because I've heard horror stories about new construction having problems with their sewer lines, which is a huge cost. But it's always going to be easier if you're concerned about radon to actually put a system in place as the house is being built, right?
That is a really good point. That's the thing that makes me kind of cranky with builders. And I get they have a lot of codes. They got a lot of stuff going on, right? But it is so much more cost effective to put a system in a home before it's built, or even do what we call stub it out. So what that is new homes, obviously they're building, so it's going to have that drain, right? Or it's going to have a sump pit, because the drain drains into the sump pit sometimes. Anyways, they can do a stub out while they're building that house, and they can actually do it if they attach to the sump pit or even the perimeter drain. And if they bring it around so that it can be interior, they can run a pipe up and then discharge out of the roof of the home, and just leave it at that for like significantly less. And then the homeowner, when they buy their house or whenever, like you're suggesting, test. They can test and they go, we have high radon. Now the mitigator, all they're going to come in and do is add a fan to that discharge vent that went into their attic. So we'll come in, cut it, add the fan, and ta-da.
And that's it. So a simple fix like that is
so easy. But if you're talking to your builder, here's the key that I have I have builders that are thinking ahead. They're putting a system in, but then what they'll do is, there's quite a few of them I've done recently, they'll do a crawl, and then they run the vent stack up through the house and out the roof, and that's good. Then they put the plug, because you got to have power to the fan. I don't care what house it is. It has to have power. Then they'll put the power to the radon system in the crawl space. And then the home is finished. Well, I can't run a cord all the way from the attic down a finished home. Well, okay, I could.
Yeah.
But, I mean,
into the crawl space.
Yeah, into the crawl space. So what I recommend, and I do work with a number of builders, I'll always say put an outlet, not electrical, an outlet within 3 feet of where that vent stack is. And then if they need a system, we come in, put a fan in, plug it in, call it a day.
You're good to go. Yeah. I had a client that purchased, there were 2-story paired homes, and they had crawl spaces, and their neighbors apparently tested for radon, and it was found to be high. And there was no way to connect to that vent stack that you were talking about.
Because of where they put it?
Well, I guess whoever they spoke with, not you guys. They weren't my clients.
Oh.
Otherwise, they would have talked to you guys. But no, they were like, we're going to have to drill a hole somewhere through a foundation wall. Like, I guess they couldn't figure out any other way to do it. So I was like,
right.
And that obviously creates a lot of added expense. Have you ever run into that?
Yes, I know what you're talking about. So some homes are built, like a lot of homes, they're sitting on their floor. So they dig the hole, right? They have a basement. Then they're sitting where their frame of their house is literally right on the foundation. It's got it. I don't recall the name right now, but it's like there's no floor joists. Because normally, like in a crawl space, for example, or even a subslab, we'll go up and through the floor joist. I call it the sweet spot. There's always that spot between the ceiling of the downstairs, whether it's a crawl or a downstairs, and the floor of the upstairs. There's that space. So we'll usually go out of that. But there are some homes being built, and they are twin homes, and they're being set. Their frame is right on the concrete. So there's no way out. It's through the concrete.
Yeah.
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 So I have come across a couple of those homes.
So that's just, I wanted to make that point, because if you're having something built, you might think about that.
Ask the builder. Every builder should be willing to do something. Just ask up front. I want you to make this at least radon ready.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's a good thing. There are builders who are definitely out there doing it. They're not common, but they are. But the downside is they're not using necessarily radon people to do those vent stacks. So they don't know the power outlet thing. They're like, oh, I can run PVC pipe straight up. Any plumber can do that. And they can. But then they don't know the rest of it. Like, what's the point and how are we going to attach a fan at what stage, So
Yeah.
they should use radon people. But
Have you ever gone out to a new construction to
oh, yeah.
talk to the builder and make suggestions as far as it's going to be easiest if you put this here or add this there, or no?
I don't, if they're my builder, I talk to them. Like, I do work with certain builders, some of the builders that do more high-end homes. And so we talk about that, and they know the drill now. But I don't just canvas builders, because actually trying to find the person who can make a decision on a site is pretty challenging. You have to kind of know who that is,
Yeah.
or who you're looking for, so you can go, hey, I'm looking for John Smith, and where's he at? And but that brings up a good question when we're talking about those flush mount houses. I don't know what the official term is. I wanted to, and I can just see these houses going up all around, and I'm like, I should just go talk to that builder. I mean, just put an outlet up by where you've got the stack, not, 3 stories down in the crawl space,
Yeah.
because they're doing it, but I didn't find
And that's
them.
just an added cost,
Uh-huh.
because you're going
A
to have
lot.
to hire an electrician
Exactly.
to add an outlet in a spot where you can use it.
Yep, and
So.
electricians are not cheap. They do charge pretty good prices. So, yep, it's an added expense and time, so that's unfortunate.
Well, is there anything that I missed? Anything else that you think of that we need to know about radon?
Well, let's talk about the
Right,
guidelines about how it's changed
Yes.
recently.
So-
You can probably speak to what you're now required to do as a realtor,
Mhm.
and then I can speak to it possibly if property management and you're a renter. We can talk about that.
I do know that, yes, they did change the laws recently, and we have this book.
That's good. You guys put together
Yeah.
a book.
Well, we didn't put it together, but we have
You
it.
hand it out.
And now, yes, absolutely, on every single transaction, I like to email this to the sellers and say, this is the book that we have to provide to the buyer's agent and the buyers now that informs them all about radon. And we'll put like a link somewhere so that if somebody out there is really concerned and you want a copy of this, we can email you a PDF copy. Just let us know that you want one. It's got tons of interesting information as far as, like you said, why it's important, how to test, what the mitigation systems look like and entail. So we do have this, and now they've added a new spot in the seller's property disclosure too. So it doesn't matter if your levels were under 4 or over 4. Now it's just if you've tested and you know anything about radon, you're required to disclose it
Correct.
and put it in your seller's property disclosure. So.
Yep. Yep, that is exactly. That just recently changed this past August, 2023. And at the same time that came into effect, it was about for property managers or tenants, it also had guidelines added to that. So for property managers, if they know that their home that the home they're renting has ever tested for radon, they need to disclose it to the future tenant or the current tenant, but for sure anyone new coming in. And then if a tenant wants to test or does test and says, hey, we're a 10, then the homeowner or the property management system can choose to retest, because they probably just did a home version, which is accurate as long as they followed protocol. But understandably, they may want to bring in someone that's certified to test to just affirm that, yep, you're right, it's a 10 or a 9 or whatever. So the tenant can ask for that, and if they know it to be high, they need to mitigate. So the property owner of that home would have to mitigate that.
And I think I read something. Do they have 6 months to mitigate it?
They do have time. It's not like instant,
Yeah.
because it's not expensive.
And I think
it's not cheap either. It's
Right.
not like buying a dryer. Well, maybe it is anymore, but it's not like a $300 fix typically.
Right. But if they don't mitigate it, or they say, "Hey, I don't want to do it," or "I can't get
Gonna.
it done within the 6 month time frame I should," it does give the tenants a right to just cancel their lease
Correct.
with no,
No kind of
no consequences or punishment.
Yeah, exactly. So that is what's changed for property managers and or just the local homeowner that's renting a house out. Same thing. Doesn't matter if you're not a big rental company or you're just a one house and I have renters. It applies to you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah.
Then that's good. That's a good thing.
It is, and it gives people have an option to try to be safe in their homes, and that's a good thing. If someone is going to, speaking of testing, if you're going to do it on your own, there's a couple options. You can just purchase a test from like Public Health, our local Radon lab. I think it's up on the Garden of the Gods somewhere. And Home Depot, Lowe's, you can hire a certified tester to do the test. Obviously, they're going to charge more because they have to make a trip to your home. And if it's a continuous monitor, they have to come back again. So you have options. But what I wanted to clarify is for the homeowner, just the local homeowner person, doing it for themselves, those tests at Home Depot, Lowe's, as long as they follow protocol, they're accurate for that point in time, which is typically 2 to 4 days. And then they'll get a result from the lab and they can decide what they want to do. But,
Okay.
Just follow the guidelines and stuff.
So do you guys test as well?
Yeah, we do some testing. We always leave a post-test behind whenever we mitigate a home because I want to know as well that the system worked, besides that they want to know. So, yeah, we do some testing. I typically don't do testing for real estate transactions and stuff because I'd use a short-term charcoal test and they're fine for a real estate transaction as long as you're bringing two, sit them side by side. There's some specific guidelines. But the continuous monitor gives that readout so you can see it moving and people tend to prefer those because they can actually see it versus one number. It doesn't make it any more accurate or less, but it's just a different approach.
So yeah, you test to make sure that your jobs
always
went the way they should. Test after the mitigation, but you don't necessarily just do testing.
No, we can test, but our key focus is mitigation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's where we're going with that one. So yeah, the thing.
Yeah, I think because obviously I have a lot of trusted inspectors as well, and all those guys, they have the machines. Probably that continuous method because they come, they set it out, they leave it for 48 hours, and like you said, you'll have a lot of data points with an overall average of what.
Yep, those are called continuous monitors, and they're basically fairly small, and there's a whole variety of appropriate kinds, so it's not going to always look the exact same. It's really about whether they're certified to test and that they keep their equipment certified as well. You should recalibrate it once a year. That's on them. They should do that, and I'm sure I'd like to think they all do.
Yeah, me too. They better. But yeah, let's see. So there was obviously that. I wanted to say, what is it? About $100 or $150, I think, is what they add on to the typical cost of an inspection to do the radon testing. And I know people out there that kind of bundle an inspection with radon with the sewer scope. Maybe you can get all that together for $500. If you're talking about a homeowner that's already in the house, never tested, on a budget, they don't want to hire somebody to come out for $100 or $150. Do you know what the county charges for the tests that you can pick up and drop off at their lab?
I think they're in the $35 range. They're not crazy expensive.
That's not bad.
But
same for Home Depot and Lowe's.
Yes, Home Depot's around $20-25. First Alert seems to be a popular brand, but they're all charcoal based. So the shape and the size might be a little different depending on what you purchased, but it's the same basically short-term tests.
Yeah.
And they're accurate for the point in time. And where to test, and not all of them have great detail, but don't test in a crawl space. You don't test in a kitchen, a bathroom, a furnace room, mechanical room. You test in a normal space, a bedroom if you prefer. I tend to like more of the family space where you're congregating a little more, but it's either one bedroom or that kind of a space is fine. I do get people who go, oh, I tested right next to my sump pit. Okay, yep, it's probably a little high over there. So,
right.
Because that's down to the soil typically. So, yeah, there's guidelines.
And that's another thing. Yeah, I mean, you may have a crawl space, but why test your crawl space? You're not living in your crawl space.
That's what I say.
Right.
Unless you've got little trolls and who's ever in there, you're not living there.
However,
test where you live.
That family room right off of the crawl space is probably a perfect place, or you would definitely want to hit that room.
Yeah. You can, or if you have, maybe there's one person, they sleep down there. You got teenagers, they burrow into their room, and you never see them.
Right.
But,
Shut the door. They're in there for hours on end without coming out. Letting that radon build up.
Yep.
That's a good place to test as well.
Yeah. So, that's funny. Yeah. I've had homeowners that it's really pretty funny. Homeowners are the best part of the job, really. Where they're like, yep, we lived here 40 years, raised all our kids in the basement, and now I think it's time to test. They're making a joke, but it's because they didn't know. And now they're like, well, when we know better, we do better.
Exactly.
So, but yeah.
Exactly.
It's like, yep, all the kids are on their way, and now we're going to test and fix it. So.
That's funny. Oh. What else? I think I feel like I've touched on most of the points that I felt were super important to touch on.
I wanted to just give an example of, I mentioned earlier that the average radon in Colorado, a radon in a home in Colorado is 6.4. But I wanted to give an equivalent of what that really means. That's like having 200 chest x-rays in 1 year if you live in a home in our average, which is 6.4.
Wow.
Yeah, just to give them a sense of what does that really mean? 6.4. What am I really getting exposed to?
So if you're
200 chest x-rays.
And if you're in that space, right, with a 6.4 reading, how long do you have to be in that space for 1 year? Well, that would be like having 200 x-rays within that 1 year.
Chest x-rays, so it's right there.
Right there, right on you,
versus
right?
your foot or something.
Well, and if they do, when you go to the dentist and get x-rays, they put all that lead bodysuit on you to try to cover you up everywhere else. So, wow, that is quite significant. 200, so you're exposed to that amount of radiation with the.
It's a lot. And
that is one thing. I think I had a lady, and she had some other kind of cancers. At least I read that the mechanism, because it is a gas, it is taken into your lungs, or I think it said that sometimes that radon gas will attach itself to a dust particle, which, like you said, is probably how it circulates through your home.
That is how it is, yeah.
Right? But you breathe in that dust particle, and it can get taken.
Yep.
And then it kind of is stored in those little sacs in your lungs, right? And it starts to break down and give off radiation, which then in turn will turn regular cells into cancer cells.
Yeah.
But I do believe it's limited to lung cancer and lung cancer only.
At this point, yeah.
So,
I've never had, because I've even had people who thought their dog died of some kind of a cancer, and they thought because they're low to the ground.
Yeah.
Maybe, but there's no research on that.
Until more research comes out and they decide to change everything on us.
Yeah, let's go with research.
If you've experienced some other kind of cancer, really, it's probably not related to radon in your home, just lung cancer.
Yes, I would say so. Yeah. But it's
but like you said, as years go, we just get more and more and more information. So I've always, as long as I've been doing this, warned people and tell people about radon and why they should test for it, and it's up to them whether or not they choose to test. But it's important to protect yourself any way that you can. So,
I
because the numbers are staggering, really.
They really are.
Yeah.
And another equivalent, this isn't an exact equivalent, but it's another one that really hits home for people. If you're at a 6.4 or a 10, that's like smoking 10 cigarettes a day, kind of like.
Wow.
So that just really brings it in of what you're really ingesting in your lungs.
What's the highest radon level that you've ever seen?
Dennis.
Here in Colorado.
Yeah, Dennis has done some that are very high, like 300. I did a home in Pueblo that was 110.
Amazing.
We got it down to a 0.3, and a 0.3 is the lowest radon level a lab can test for. Our average air we breathe is a 0.4.
Okay.
Give or take,
Yeah.
where you're standing. But yeah, so we got it down because it was a crawl. It was a whole house crawl. So that's pretty amazing. Wow. Pretty amazing.
I'd had no idea. Like, you know what I mean? Because I've see houses that test and so forth. I'd say in my career, maybe the highest I'd seen was a 17, 18. But I had no idea they got up in the hundreds. And you went from over 100 to a 0.3. That's pretty darn good.
It was pretty impressive. Yeah.
Yeah.
But again, that was a whole house crawl. Like I said, those are one of the most successful approaches. More expensive, like explained, but you have good results.
That was actually one other question I was going to ask you. So with these radon mitigation systems, once you put one in place, like you said, you may come across a house that already has one. Are there any failures that you see with these systems that is just like typical? Like, and so what should they be looking out for?
Oh, they'll know.
Yeah.
Most of the time they know.
Most of the time they know.
Because the most likely failing component of your radon system is going to be the fan. And when the fan fails, it's the bearings. It's a pretty straightforward component. It doesn't have a lot of moving parts. But when those bearings start to fail, because it's a fan, right? It's moving. It starts to give off a noise. And pretty soon you're like, oh, my neighbors are getting cranky. My fan is driving them crazy, or themselves. So that's the most likely part to fail in a system, because your discharge is really we use steel downspout, so we're using downspout. Some companies use the PVC pipe as their discharge. You've seen them; the white pipe goes up. We don't use that, but it doesn't matter. Both of them. One just looks better in my opinion, but both of them work. Anyways, they're just steel and plastic. As long as they got sealed right, there's no reason those things should fail. I mean, a gigantic wind might blow one off, but
that fan, it never stops moving. So,
they're pretty
what's
amazing.
the lifespan for those typically?
Good question. They're all warranted for the most part. They're warranted for 5 years. I typically use Fantech. There's other good brands. They're warranted for 5 years like the other brands, but they typically last 10 to 15 years. There's a model out there called a KTA, built partially here in Colorado. Springs, actually.
Support local.
Yeah. Oh, I buy a lot from them. But that fan just boggles my brain sometimes. I have gone into homes that have a fan that's been running 24/7 for 20 years. That fan's going.
Wow.
It is amazing. I
nice.
mean, I'm geeking out on that, but it really is amazing. It's a unit that runs 24/7.
So
it's still going.
That is great. Later. Now, if you find out your fan is bad, I assume you can just come in and replace the fan and the fan only.
Yep.
What does that cost somebody?
Depends on their fan model, because the fans are different. They have different how size. Big, not in like physical size, but how much air they move, how big are they. So the average fan, a KTA model, is actually kind of expensive. It costs about $400 to replace that fan.
Okay.
Because it's a special kind of fan. It has a whole transformer. It just has a lot more options you can do with it, the system itself. But anyways, or it could be as little as $300, depending on what kind of fan they have.
Okay.
And that's all included, meaning you get a new fan, we replace it, labor, make sure everything is working.
And so that's the most common failure that you typically see.
Most common. Yeah.
Other than what, homeowner error? Do you ever see that too? Like you said, you lay all of that barrier in a crawl space, but if people are moving boxes in and out, and is it easy to rip open? Do you see people doing stuff like that? And then they're like, oh.
If I know a home is storing stuff in their crawl space, I'll say to them, lay old carpet in your storage path, you know, or even old cardboard if you don't have carpet around. Lay cardboard or carpet over your walk path, or if you have your furnace in your crawl space, do something with the walk path. We label everything, that's required. But, you know, if you have a contractor coming down there to fix your furnace, they don't always know. I mean, in general, people are more aware, but they don't always know. And I'm like, just don't let them drag their toolbox across the plastic. If you get a little rip, duct tape it, seriously. But if you get a larger rip, then we might have to come in and reseal that spot.
Yeah. Okay.
So, yeah, that does occasionally happen, but I try to prevent that by telling them,
making people aware.
Yeah, And some people ask because they can see it's plastic. I mean, you could tear it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like you said, it was a rancher, and the crawl space was the whole size of the main level floor print, which is probably like 2,000 square feet or something. And it had plastic down over all of it. Cleanest, nicest crawl space I've ever seen. It was probably like 5 feet tall too.
Oh,
so
nice.
it wouldn't,
Yeah,
you
like
could
those.
really walk around down there. But just because you see plastic doesn't mean you have a system either.
Oh, for sure.
Right?
For sure.
So don't assume because you see a crawl space covered in plastic that there's a system.
Yeah. And I tend to use white plastic, so you always would know most of the time, because the black vapor barrier that builders do, that's just black. And it's a good enough plastic, but it is not for a radon system. It's just a vapor barrier. It's not coming up the sides. It's not sealed in any way. It's laying there on the dirt.
I also read, which this is probably important because there's probably a lot of people out there that like to save money as much as I do. So it's not just as simple either as, I've got some cracks in my foundation or this or that, and I'm just going to go get concrete sealant and seal up all those cracks, and that's going to solve my radon problem, right? No.
You know, really good point. When I go into a sub-slab especially, or even a foundation drain situation, but I'll always look at, if I can, it's not a finished, it doesn't have carpet over it or whatever, I'm always going to be looking at the expansion joints along the edge. That's that flexible, spongy stuff that builders that are laid when the slab is poured, so that the slab can expand as it cures. And so when they start to get exposed or outright cracks, then I'm going to recommend that it gets sealed with commercial grade polyurethane. Because there's two reasons you want to do it. One, we want to get a good vacuum. Two, there's three. Two, it's a potential source of radon. Now you've just got a big old crack sitting there. The radon just goes, like water, right?
Yep. It'll find the path of least resistance, as they say, right?
And then finally, the reason I'll have them seal it is it helps with their commercial conditioned air. Air conditioning and heat is escaping through those cracks, right? So once you seal them, you're going to get a tighter house.
So on top of reducing your radon exposure, you're also just kind of sealing up your home and making it more waterproof and energy efficient. So
So there's a lot of things that, as a mitigator, you're going to go in, and I'm always looking for certain things. And I should be, right? I mean, that's my job. You're an expert at being a realtor. I'm good at what I'm doing. So I'm going to be looking for those things, guiding my client along with what needs to happen. They can choose to do some of those things or not. Like you said, they want to maybe save money. That's their call. Yeah. I don't ever push anything on anyone. I'll just go in, walk them through what needs to happen, present a proposal, and they get to decide how they want to move forward.
And that's another nice thing about you guys as well, right? Like, you don't like to give quotes without actually seeing the property in person, knowing exactly what you're dealing with, so that whatever quote you provide to a homeowner is going to be pretty darn accurate. Without a lot of contingencies, because you've put eyes on it. You know exactly what it's going to take.
That's a big thing, and a lot of mitigators don't go out, especially in Denver. Even in Denver, they don't go out. They'll just look it up online. if they can find the plans, great, and they'll just say what they're going to do. And a lot of times that probably turns out. A lot of times it might not because they haven't seen the home, right? So I always want to come out. It costs my company more, right? More money, time. You're rolling the truck, all that biz. But I know I'm what I'm up against as well as what the client's going to do. And when I arrive to fix that situation, the price isn't going to change.
Yeah.
And that's a big deal for Aspen Radon. We want to make sure.
Yeah, that's nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, people appreciate it too. And also, I get calls. Sometimes they're like, they gave me a phone quote. I'm just not comfortable with that. And I'm like, applaud you. Don't be comfortable with that.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, because it could be the bait and switch. I mean, and in all fairness, it wasn't like they intended to bait and switch you, but they kind of know, right? Because once they get out there, like, oh, hey, I didn't know you had this gigantic HVAC header.
Right. Oh, I didn't know there wasn't an outlet. Oh, I didn't know.
Legitimately so. And they didn't know because they didn't take the time and effort to come out. You know, so yeah, I recommend always try to get an in-person quote if you can get one. The only time I'll do a phone quote, and I have done them, is if it's somewhere like Westcliff. I'm not just going to drive out to Westcliff to do a quote and then they pick someone else. Okay, that just isn't financially
We have to
wise.
make good use of our time as well.
Right. And then the other time is if it's a whole house crawl, I will sometimes do a phone quote. If they're in town, I definitely want to see it, but say it's out of town. Because with a whole house crawl, you have a lot of options. You have not really 4 sides because you never want to put a radon system on the front of the house, but you have a lot of options for discharge. Because I'm looking, people are like, oh yeah, you can discharge out the side of my house. I'm like, well, I don't know. Do you have a bank of windows on the side of your house? You know, I'm looking at windows and everything. But anyways, with the whole house crawl, you have more choices. You have more options for power. You can always come up through the floor into the laundry room maybe, you know, to get that power. So that's the only time I'll do it. And even then, if they're in town, I still want to see them.
And that's nice because it gives the homeowner a little bit of say, right? And, oh, well, I would prefer it over here instead of over there. Or, we can save money by putting it here and using an outlet in your laundry room versus over here. So, and
I walk them through verbally. I'll walk them through my plan. But if they're like, oh, I definitely don't want it over there, and I'm like, okay, we're going to try to accommodate the client as much as possible. But if they're like, we want it over here, and I'll say, well, I'll tell you why we can't do here. You have this huge window sitting right here, and so we're not going to go up, the discharge is not going to go up past a window, and, you know, people are reasonable.
Right.
I mean,
well,
they're
who
like,
wants to look at that out their window anyways?
Yeah. So, I mean, but they just don't think it through. They're thinking just that fan component. I'm thinking all the way up the roof line and what is in my way, you know. And all homes are built differently, not just windows, but they might have bump outs. They might have, it's just a variety of things. So most people are reasonable. And once I say, here's why, they'll be like, oh, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But if we can accommodate how you want it done, we're going to do that. Absolutely. Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And then is there any maintenance for homeowners to do on these systems or moving forward after they get one? Periodic testing that they should keep up with?
That's a good question. So really, these systems are pretty maintenance free, but it doesn't hurt you want to pay attention to your indicator. It's required that all radon systems have what are called indicators. That's telling you how the vacuum is at the time of install. It might be telling you what amps you're pulling. It depends on what kind of fan was installed. At any rate, be sure you're looking at it occasionally. We should label it. Every radon system should have a label on it saying your vacuum at the time of install was a 0.6. It might vary a hair up or down, but it should never be sitting at 0. If it's sitting there or lost a lot of vacuum, you should say, I should call on it. Something's wrong here. And then keep, you know, leaves and stuff off your discharge. If you live in a place that has a lot of leaves or you know, evergreen needles, keep that cleaned out. Other than that, you really not much to do with them. So, and then you had a second part to that question, not just maintenance, but
and how often? Like
testing.
Yeah.
Yep.
You know?
So the EPA recommends that you test every 2 years.
Every 2 years
Yep.
is their recommendation.
Yeah.
Okay.
practically no one does.
Yeah.
But again, it goes back to knowledge, though, right?
Right.
And
Knowledge is
what are my
power.
options? And what are my options? Because, no one wants to go, I want to spend $150 every 2 years just to get a test. You do have other options when it's just your home and you're wondering.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, Heather, this was really good.
Yeah. Thanks for coming. Why don't you tell everybody, if you want to pass out your contact information in case there's anybody that feels like, oh, I'm going to test and maybe they need a quote down the line.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Yeah. So it's Aspen Radon. We do have a website. It's aspenradon.com. So it's pretty easy. The phone number, and that, again, is on the website, or you can look it up. You can Google us. We should pop up. I certainly pay Google Ads enough to do that. But we should pop up in the top 3 or 4. But anyways, 719-322-3131, or you could just do a website inquiry from my website. Either way works. Just if you're doing a website inquiry, I do ask that you include a phone number because it's easier to have a conversation about what you're wondering about or looking to do versus me trying to text you or email you back, 2 paragraphs of this, and then you're naturally going to have another question. So
Right.
let's just talk.
Yeah.
There's
I
never
agree.
pressure. I'm no pressure, actually. I get a lot of compliments on the time I spent explaining things to people, because a lot of mitigators they're not going to spend the time. They're going to
Yeah.
answer your question and move on, or that sort of thing. And in a previous life, I was a technical trainer, so I tend to want to explain.
Me too.
Yeah.
I'm an over-splainer sometimes. I'll admit it.
Yeah.
But yeah, and this is the other thing for as serious of an issue that it is, as far as when it comes to buying and selling real estate. It's one of the easiest hurdles, I think, to overcome. Because we do that all the time. Even if the seller does not want to install the system prior to closing, you guys can come out, you can look at it, you can give a quote. We know exactly how much money to hold back, and the seller can pay for it out of their proceeds at closing.
That is a really good point.
Then you guys go in, you
Yep.
put the system in, and new buyer moves in, and we're all set, pretty
Yes.
much.
That is another example of getting rid of a hurdle, right? When people are going through the selling process, there's a lot of money being outlaid sometimes, and it's like, oh my gosh, granted, hopefully they're going to make a profit, they're going to get that money back, but we do accept payment at close. Oftentimes, some mitigators won't do that. Aspen Radon will do that.
Okay.
So
So even if they wanted to put it in prior to closing.
like into escrow, and then title cuts the check. They do it a couple ways. Title will cut the check. Okay, let's back this up a little. They choose Aspen Radon. Yep, okay, we want to go forward, but we don't close until January 25th. But the buyer wants it in before that. So we'll come in, we'll do it. Title can either cut the check at the time of close, or they can even hand it off. Maybe if the buyer is like, we'll plan it after we move in, hand it to the buyer. Buyer will arrange for the install at their convenience, and then they pay me when they get it done.
So here's your check.
And it's already made out to Aspen Radon. When someone's not really getting their realtor that helps them with that part of it, I'll say, you really, if you're deciding on a company, it's better if the company, you just don't give them the cash. It's up to you how you want to do it, obviously, but you want to make sure if they said they wanted a radon system that they're getting paid to do a radon system and not to buy a new couch. So that's why you have title, put the money aside, cut the check to whoever you selected, and then that's where it goes to. Yeah.
Yeah, we do that quite often.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
and like I said, you can credit them the money. You can actually pay you at closing. You can install it before. You can install it after. It makes it quite simple. Actually,
a lot of flexibility.
It's not too bad of an issue to overcome if you find yourself with a house that's high in radon. So
yeah, and it's one of the more likely ones that a seller will approve, most likely, because it's a health issue. And I get it. Some sellers are like, nope, as is, this is it, and that's all fair because that's what they planned up front. But it's a health issue, and it's hard to tell someone, no, I'm not going to fix something that might give you lung cancer. I mean, it doesn't make you, it's not a good look.
Right. Or at least give you something towards it.
So, and it isn't really expensive. It's not that expensive. It's
No.
not a new roof. It's not a whole new furnace system. Those things can cost, well, depends on the house. It could be very expensive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
All right.
Well, very nice. Thanks for coming and talking with me today. I greatly appreciate it. And like I said, if you want more information, instead of listening to this again, we will hook you up with this booklet. It's got a lot of the details that you heard us talking about today.
Mm-hmm.
And we will email you a PDF copy of that so you can read over it. And, of course, if you find yourself needing a mitigation system, call Miss Abby with Aspen Radon. So.
Thank you. Well, thank you for having me. Thank you for being so prepared. I
Oh,
really appreciate
thanks.
your questions. I mean, I know I handed you something and I'm like, oh, here's a way better. Good job. Because you're really getting to the heart of some of the stuff that needs to be known. And it's nice to have a realtor that's knows it, understands it. Thank you.
Oh, you're quite
Yeah.
welcome. My pleasure.
All right.
Okay, well, signing off. Everybody have a great day, and we hope that you find some of this information very useful.
Yep. Thank you for having me.